will now begin with our first academic session. Please join me in welcoming our first speaker of the day, Mr. Raza Rumi. Mr. Raza Ahmed Rumi is a policy analyst, journalist, and author. He's a distinguished lecturer at City University of New York. Previously, he was director of the Park Center for Independent Media at Ithaca College. He is the editor of the Friday Times and founder of Naya Daur Media, and has worked as a TV broadcaster at Capital TV and Express News in Pakistan. Let's give him a warm round of applause, please.
Thank you very much. I must thank Junaid, my friend, who's made me come here. I only arrived yesterday and I'm a bit jet-lagged, so please forgive me if I fumble or I'm not too coherent. But Dean Altaf, the faculty and students, really an honor and privilege to be here. The topic that was given to me, I thought a bit about it, the day before. And obviously, trust in media is something that we all debate and deliberate, not just in Pakistan, but it's a global crisis of sorts. And so a few reflections. I'll speak for, let's say, 15, 20 minutes, and then we can have a Q&A session for some of the themes or topics that may be of interest to students here. So what the urgent issue facing globally, both the media ecosystems and those who consume media, or now they're called the audiences, whether online or otherwise, is how do we consolidate public trust in media and communication, especially in a world marked by volatility, polarization, and profound technological change. We are living in what some scholars call an infodemic, a moment when the volume, velocity, and veracity of information are all in flux. And within the swirl of content, public trust in journalism and media institutions is eroding rapidly. In the United States, where I teach and work for most of the year, Pew Research found that in 2023, only 32% of Americans trusted national media outlets. In Pakistan, the picture is not too different. A Gallup Pakistan survey in 2022 showed that trust in mainstream media was declining rapidly since 2018. And with many citizens feeling that the media is either partisan, censored, or simply out of touch with the needs of the people that it aims to cater. This brings me to the core of my talk this morning, which is the role of communication research in understanding this erosion of trust, and more importantly, how do we rebuild it? So let me begin by revisiting some foundational communication theories that remain strikingly relevant in this moment and the kind of crisis that we are grappling with. First, of course, I'm sure many of you are familiar already, is the agenda setting theory by McCombs and Shaw. This theory reminds us that the media may not tell us what to think, but it certainly tells us what to think about. In a country like Pakistan, where news cycles are often dominated by elite political squabbles, this theory forces us to ask whose agendas are being set and whose voices are missing. You must have all seen how in Pakistani television or even digital media spaces, more often than not, the discussion or reporting is about the elite political conflicts. Rarely people's issues such as health, education, climate change, and declining environment, they get less than 10% coverage. Gallup does a monthly survey of the content of talk shows and the newspaper reporting, and the results are startling because almost 70% of the content is about political parties and their conflict, followed by economy, and that too is very much framed in an elitist fashion as to who gets what and why, rarely looking at people's or what we call the public interest. Secondly, the framing theory, once again, is very relevant. Framing theory explores how issues are presented. Is a protest a struggle for justice or a disruption of order. You know, currently in LA, Los Angeles, people are protesting against the hardline anti-immigration policies, and much of the mainstream media is painting that as some kind of a riot. You know, the term riot, I mean, there's a whole debate on riot or protest. And even in Pakistan, we see when Baloch women come to Islamabad for their fair demands, they're painted as rioters, anti-state, treasonous activists, while barely or rarely looking at what kind of issues they are protesting for. And this is why framing shapes public understanding of what is going on. Consider the way mainstream Pakistani channels in the recent past have framed women's marches, the Aurat March, for example. Always a subject of vilification. And it's not just the mainstream broadcast media, but even the digital spaces have done even worse. The kind of commentary, the kind of reporting, the kind of spotlighting that they've done is to denigrate and undermine the very themes and the ideas that those women's marches are perpetrating for. And so are these framed as genuine civic movements or as foreign-sponsored disruptions? Aurat March is also called as a foreign-sponsored movement. The PTM protests for the last so many years have also been termed as such. And the Baloch, we often, the term Baloch protest comes, and Indian involvement is, those associations have been drawn by the media, sadly, in the public mind. Thirdly, the spiral of silence theory by Newman tells us that when people believe their opinions are in the minority, they often remain silent, fearing social isolation. And social media paradoxically both amplifies and suppresses voices. It gives everyone a platform, but also creates echo chambers where dissent is punished and not debated. And I can tell you personally, I mean, I have been very active on social media for, let's say, almost a decade now. And even now, for the past few years, I'm very mindful as to if I tweet something, what is going to be the reaction? Because, more often than not, there is a whole pushback that comes in the form of either trolls or misinformed or other sort of agenda-laden accounts coming and attacking you. And that, more often than not, makes you not say anything. And while, ironically, social media is a democratic platform, it is open to all, yet it kind of puts you in silence. And there are many other people who are very wary of expressing themselves, not just in Pakistan. I'm now in Pakistan, there's so much, of late have been restrictions. But look at our neighborhood in India, in Bangladesh, where people have been picked up and jailed for their Facebook posts against the prime ministers of the country or other such opinions that they've expressed. And finally, the media systems dependency theory explains how in times of crises, people depend heavily on media. Yet, when the media itself is untrusted, what happens? So, for example, a very relevant thing that came to my mind, I was writing this, was that during the recent floods, 2 years ago, many people turned onto WhatsApp groups and YouTube channels instead of the television, seeking unfiltered updates because there was so much information suppression or partial information that was being relayed, and especially those who were affected the worst in those floods. But why communication research matters now more than ever? I think that is something that we really need to look at, and in particular, given the rapid changes that have been occurring in the last 2 decades or so. The media landscape in Pakistan and elsewhere has undergone a seismic shift. Journalism is no longer confined to newsrooms. The gatekeepers are now algorithms designed or managed in the Silicon Valley or wherever other big tech platforms are located, and not editors in Karachi or Lahore or Delhi or Washington. And so that has totally changed the way we understand media and we look at it. And this is why it calls for a much deeper research into the trends that we witness and perhaps interact with them every day. Um, and let's now look at how social media has upended trust. Platforms like Facebook and YouTube have enabled alternative voices to flourish. Granted, this is good news for diversity and public engagement, but it also means that misinformation spreads faster than fact checks. The same algorithm that elevates a young woman journalist in Lahore can also punish a conspiracy theory in Quetta. And I think one of the most stark examples was this, alleged incident in one of the Lahore educational institutions where it was reported that a young woman had been assaulted or raped on the sort of institution's premises. And later on, it turned out to be false news. But the reaction to that particular story was so severe that you had protests in so many parts of the country, especially in the Punjab, leading to damage of public and private property and endless debate on it, while all of it was based on a false reporting, unverified, of course, with no detail. And if you were to look at so many other examples, in the world, this kind of rapid wildfire misinformation has actually caused deaths. In India, in Brazil, WhatsApp groups have led to lynchings and killings of people. Here we had protests and burning of college property and buses, but we see in India, misinformation about a person carrying beef in their trolley or tractor or car or whatever leads to the lynching. Mobs come around and kill those people while it's all based on fake reporting. So I guess that is something that we really have to look at, how all of that is evolving and what needs to be done. Big tech's role in shaping public discourse is no longer an academic question. It is a democratic concern as well. Algorithms are not neutral, as you know. The big platform that I'm sure many of you use, X, formerly Twitter, is not a neutral platform. It's owned by world's richest man. And he was very active in American politics as well, seeking favors from the American administration, gets hundreds of billions of dollars of subsidies, and yet claims to run a neutral, independent social media platform. So it's not independent. Of course, there's a political agenda and there's an economic agenda there. The algorithms are designed to maximize engagement, and often outrage is more engaging than nuance, of course. In the US, once again, the example I cite always is we saw how dynamics played out in the 2020 elections with misinformation about voting and mail-in ballots. In Pakistan, similar patterns emerged around election rigging claims and vaccine misinformation. Elections is a contentious subject, I'll leave it, but vaccination campaigns have been affected majorly by misinformation via social media platforms, especially in the Northwest, especially in other parts where children need anti-polio vaccination. We all have undergone that. In the United States also, currently they are facing an outbreak of measles. I think there have been like 300 or 400 cases. This is world's most advanced country with the best of healthcare facilities, etc. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that the vaccine for measles causes autism or other side effects in kids. And this false ideas spread rapidly. They keep on multiplying and they're unverified. And the algorithms push them because they want engagement. They want you to click so that you can see the products which are being advertised, or your information of clicking is being gathered and given to marketing companies for business. So that is something which is also, unfortunately, we are witnessing in this region and in Pakistan in particular. If you go to the YouTube and check out who has which kind of content gets the highest numbers of views or clicks, you'll have the answer. I need not spell. So therefore, traditional journalism or the ideas or the theories that we understood is struggling. Declining revenues in newspapers. I've been editing this, I'm once again editing a paper, and I know on a daily basis the financial, two of our contributors are also here. And it is a struggle, literally a struggle to keep any legacy outfit afloat, let alone invest more in it. Censorship, you all have heard stories. I mean, it is not new. In fact, Pakistan's history since 1947 is laced with direct or indirect efforts to censor the media, right from the start or inception of the country. You know, there's up and down sometimes, there are some exceptions, but that's been a constant. And then attacks on journalists, whether they are physical attacks leading to violence or hurt, injury, or death in extreme cases, or reputational attacks that we see online. You can see that there's so many journalists now who are regularly victims of trends, you know, social media trends. फलां ऐसे हैं, फलां वैसी है, और वो तरह तरह की लग़वियात जो हैं वो चलाई जाती हैं और उसको नाम दिया जाता है ये जी ट्रेंड है, ये एक some kind of activism है. And in Pakistan, we've also seen blocking of media outlets, websites, pressures on anchors. Many of them some have spoken about it, many don't talk about it. And the chilling effect of vague regulations, Pika Act, for example, or even the restrictions under Article 19 in the Constitution of Pakistan are so vague. I mean, how do you define national interest? How do you define security? You know, these are undefined things. I mean, for me, if I don't agree with Junaid, I mean, I can easily say he's violating the national interest. And, you know, who is going to judge? If I'm more powerful, my word will carry more weight. So all these undefined, and in the Pika law and the more recently, the efforts made by the former PTI government, they were trying to push some, rules under that Pika ordinance, and now a new version has been pushed through, are extremely draconian if they are going to be implemented in toto. And similarly, but it's not Pakistan alone. You know what is happening in India. Similar set of rules in Bangladesh have been. So you see, we see this kind of a very paradoxical development. On the one hand, we look at media spaces being democratized, opened up for public engagement and public interest, supposedly. At the same time, we see an increase in restrictions, doxing, attacks, online attacks, and other methods to quell and suppress freedom of expression. But then there are, of course, signs of hope. I mean, that's the good part of digital media spaces. You know, for example, in the United States, I used to direct a center for independent media, which is basically non-corporate media, which is not funded by the big business or the government. And we have dozens and dozens of independent outlets. I'm sure if you are familiar with ProPublica, which is a leading investigative journalism website run through public donations and donations by those who want independent reporting to be there. There's a Marshall Project. There's Democracy Now, something a site I would strongly recommend you all to look at, democracynow.org, which has a really unfiltered critical commentary on world affairs and American affairs. And they do cover Pakistan and South Asia quite a bit as well. And in Pakistan, we have, earlier on, we had websites like Hamsab. And then, we have Sojag, Naya Daur, if I may praise myself, and other outlets that are trying to present some alternative views that challenge both what is being reported in the mainstream and highlight the voices which are excluded generally. And in particular, voices from what we call the margins, from Balochistan, from the tribal districts of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, from rural areas that we often don't see them on mainstream programming. How many times have you seen reporting on rural areas or the concerns? I mean, currently the farmers in Pakistan are facing an unprecedented crisis. You know, they have suffered so many losses, trillions of rupees. And they, you just saw the numbers that, the poverty, the total number of poor people officially has increased by 5% just in a few years. And that is again very tightly managed data reporting. The actual numbers are much higher. But other than sort of blaming the ruling party or the previous government, we don't actually see what is happening in the rural areas. And this disconnect is something that happened in the US, and I witnessed it, when Trump was elected the first time in 2016. One of the biggest reasons was that the rural America was never being reported on by legacy outlets like New York Times, Washington Post. They didn't know what the voters were thinking. They didn't know what their concerns were. And they were only highlighting the coastal, the New Yorks and Los Angeles and DC and big urban centers, while much of middle America and rural America voted against the earlier or forms of status quo, which they thought was impoverishing them or denying them economic opportunities. And we have a similar disconnect in the February 2024 elections, where the surveys and mainstream reporting was saying something else, and the voters gave a totally different verdict, and you had a big disconnect. I mean, Pakistan was more to do with censorship, but there is definitely the bias there. So, I mean, I do also want to, because I spoke about the infodemic that faces us here, a recent MIT study showed that false news on Twitter spreads 6 times faster than true news, that the power of virality without verification is almost a disease of the public mind now. And yet, citizen journalists are doing great job, whether Black Lives Matter movement in the United States, the PTM protests, the Baloch protests. Again, digital spaces allow for their coverage. But we also need to look at why the legacy media has lost its trust. Very quickly, I won't go into the detail. I think one of the key markers there is who owns the media. And that is, again, something in the past, let's say since the 1980s, since the rise of what we call neoliberalism or the neoliberal capitalist order, we've seen concentration of media in a fewer and fewer hands, and especially by those who accumulate capital. In the United States in 1980, nearly 50 companies owned the media that the Americans consume. In 2024, it has shrunk to 5 companies, from 50 to 5 companies. They own 90% of media, whether it's radio, digital spaces, websites, etc., etc. And same is the case in India, where the Ambanis and Adanis have been buying all the outlets. In the recent India-Pakistan war, you saw how the legacy media behaved and misinformed their public, but made a joke of India on a world stage. I mean, the international media has not stopped reporting on the falsehoods that the Indian media was projecting during the crisis. And not just misinforming their public, but also, affecting their military strategy. And in Pakistan, I can cite many other examples, but here also you will see that a lot of mainstream legacy media owners are who? Those who make ghee, those who, make soaps, those who, sell tobacco products. So media channel or an outlet is just an extension of their business. It's not really a public trust or public interest led media ownership. I mean, there are very few outlets where you can actually say that there's some kind of editorial gatekeeping. Otherwise, it's purely, I mean, I think if you were to look at 24/7 news channels, I think more than 78% of them are owned by business concerns. And real estate is perhaps now emerged as the largest stakeholder. It's not the public. It's not the journalists. It's not the editors. It's not the reporters. It's real estate owners, dealers, file peddlers, etc., etc. So anyway, where does I'll quickly wind up so that we have some time. One other important issue that I wanted to highlight was obviously that what kind of research do we need, in this evolving crisis? I can go on and on with examples. So I think what we need to look at are the localized trust metrics. In Pakistan, for example, what does trust mean to a viewer or a consumer of media of all kinds in a rural versus urban setting? For example, in rural Sindh, what does trust mean versus in urban Lahore? Just to give an example. Then we do need to look at the algorithmic transparency studies. We often look at कि जी ये फलाने यूट्यूबर ने इतने डॉलर कमा लिए हैं, वो डॉलर खोर हैं, ये है वो है. We have that kind of superficial understanding, but we don't know precisely how algorithms are working, whether they are being manipulated, whether they are responding to advertising, and how do they, by the time, I can give an example, my own mother, who's now an avid Facebook user, believes whatever is there on Facebook. So there's, more of, 2 or 3 times a day, she sends me these patently false stories from Facebook. Somebody's shared, atrocious kind of story that, I don't know, Maryam Nawaz is dead or something like that. And she's like, this has happened. I'm like, no, it has not happened. Put on the TV channel or go somewhere else. But that's how do these ideas and these stories and posts and graphics reach the audiences? I think it's that kind of algorithmic scrutiny that we need to look at. And then, of course, as always, framing analysis is relevant. There has been a lot of work, but I think in the digital sort of age, more of that investigation needs to be done. And then the audience ethnographies, as in, going beyond the ratings, because the ratings on TV, I can tell you, I was with the TV industry, they are a sham. I mean, a complete lie. Because at that particular, I even went to Islamabad High Court, challenged the system of ratings, and Islamabad High Court actually accepted my petition and asked the government, Pemara, to redo the rating system. Nothing has happened, of course, Pakistan hai, तो इतनी आसानी से तो नहीं होता. But ये कि 500 मीटर थे उस ज़माने में, I remember, 500 in a country of 250 million people, maybe it has increased to 700 or 800, somebody was telling me, of which there is not even one उस ज़माने में फाटा होता था. ये हमने petition में आर्ग्यू किया था. और बलूचिस्तान में एक भी नहीं था उस वक्त. मालिक बैठे हुए, आपको ज़्यादा पता होगा मुझसे, वो सारे थे जी फैसलाबाद में, कराची में, लाहौर में. टूथपेस्ट कहाँ बिकेगी, चावल कहाँ बिकेगा, घी कौन खरीदेगा, सोप कौन खरीदेगा, डिटर्जेंट कहाँ बिकेगा, वगैरह वगैरह. और उसकी बुनियाद के ऊपर सारा एडवर्टाइजिंग रेवेन्यू. सो ऑब्वियसली the framing of news and what kind of stories the outlets are going to cover is very much then becomes dependent on the kind of advertising system that has been developed. And so I think that is something we really have to look at the audience ethnographies as to how people navigate these information ecosystems. And finally, we need research that explores how to integrate media literacy into school and university curricula. Again, this is a very global issue. It's not limited to Pakistan. I mean, how do you differentiate between an authentic website and a fake news peddler or a, misleading website? So what are the tools at hand, considering that, more and more young people they don't read books anymore. They are on their phones or tablets or whatever other means. How do they navigate between these? And that's why media literacy is so important. I mean, I think that, at the matriculation level, it has to be now a compulsory subject. वैसे भी we need to do away with the Pakistan studies, and turn it into civics, what it used to be when I was growing up. Suddenly एक दिन civics की किताबें उन्होंने कहा आप ये ख़त्म हो गई है, नई किताब खरीदें जाकर. अनीस बुक कॉर्नर मेन मार्केट से मुझे याद है, और वो एकदम पाकिस्तान स्टडीज़ आ गया. तो सिविक्स जो था और जो है होना चाहिए, वो उसका ये हिस्सा होना चाहिए. एक सिविक रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है मीडिया के साथ इंगेज करने की, उसको समझने की, उसको नेविगेट करने की. एंड यू नो देयर इज अ होल मूवमेंट इन द यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स एंड यूरोप एज वेल, where more and more schools are adopting that from grade 8 onwards. Because otherwise, we are going to, what kind of citizens are we going to prepare? Because media shapes the kind of personality and public opinion and minds. Uh, and we can't really escape this reality. So I guess I've taken more time than I planned. I'll end here, and if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer. What we have about 5-6 minutes.
My question is that, in my opinion, and question from you is that there are three aspects. The first of all, that when it comes to the legacy media, ultimately there are the question of ethics. Whoever is running the media, he or she should follow the ethical responsibility in a true letter and spirit. The second side is that of laws and legislations. And the third and the perhaps most important, which you have mentioned at the end of your discussion, that is media literacy. So my opinion is that which one is relatively more important, which one may be implemented on the war footing grounds, and what is the ultimate solution for the challenges which you are facing nowadays regarding it?
बहुत सारे सवालात हैं, but really useful. I think all three are important, but I would say that what you call media ethics is perhaps the most important, and I would reframe that more as the editorial oversight. So the institution of editor, which is now, I mean, an endangered species, especially in Pakistan, you know, with all the news channels, because I've worked with two directly, there was no editorial gatekeeping. You know, director news can be anyone. I mean, it could be the Seth's brother, his brother-in-law, his दामाद, वो उसको वो बना के डायरेक्टर न्यूज़ बिठा देंगे. अब उनकी क्या ट्रेनिंग है कि उन्होंने कैसे सिफ्ट करना है मटेरियल को, किस चीज़ को कितना टाइम देना है, कौन सी चीज़ चलानी है, नहीं चलानी, कैसे चलानी है, कैसे प्रेजेंट करनी है, all the kind of framing issues that we talk about, that is in the legacy media has declined beyond belief. That's why you see so many mistakes that occur and so much of misinformation or disinformation that goes out through TV screens. And in the digital spaces, that is non-existent because the big tech companies, you know, Meta or Facebook, is not a publishing platform. Yet, it is one of the biggest sources of news. X is not a news platform. It has no ethical responsibility, whatever Elon Musk says. It will push anything that will get engagement. You know, so I guess media ethics, a debate on that is vital. But and for that, then legislation, laws become important. So the second one becomes a kind of a related to the first one. But then laws, not the way we understand कि वो एक ऑर्डिनेंस पास कर लें, उसको 8-10 बाबू बैठ के इस्लामाबाद, पिंडी में, लाहौर में पुश कराएं और नोटिस भेजें, वो नहीं. There are other ways of self-regulation and which are also weak mechanisms. They exist in Pakistan, but they have to be bolstered, you know. I hope I've addressed your question.
I'm asking in the context of 1984, George Orwell's Big Brother. I'm really jealous from Big Brothers because they confuse the commoners through trend selection. When you mentioned Air PTM and the Aurat March, when there was PTM going on as a massive moment, or the Baloch Jati Committee as a massive moment, the Big Brothers led the Aurat March with more push because they blamed the same marches that, oh, boys, you are not respecting your women at home. So how are you asking for life in Pakistan? How do you say that kind of priming, that kind of agenda setting through selection and priming?
Complicated सवाल है, but I mean, see, agenda selection. So obviously, it is in countries like Pakistan, elites or powerful quarters, they want to control the media. So the big business obviously controls the legacy media anyway. उन्हीं के हाथों में है. And the state, which is the big brother of the big business, sets the landscape. And obviously, they've been trying to do that with digital media. And digital media has proved to be tougher than they had anticipated. You know, the newspapers can easily be arm twisted, TV channels, anchors can be influenced or fixed, quote unquote, but digital spaces have been tougher. So that's why Twitter had to be blocked for so long. So many thousands of Facebook pages have been constantly taken away since 2016, 17, I remember. You know, thousands of Facebook pages were taken down with the help of Facebook. So the problem, and the media companies, these big tech companies comply. I mean, look at now in India, for example, my YouTube channel, my X account is invisible to Indians. Thousands of India has blocked thousands of YouTube channels from Pakistan and X accounts or Facebook accounts, and they have complied. So-called Western big tech platforms that talk about democracy and freedom of expression, and India, which also claims itself to be world's largest democracy. So in Pakistan, such selection is done obviously on the basis of the elite agenda, elite interest. So at some time, maybe one movement suits them, at the other time it doesn't suit them. You can see PTI was very much, the right kind of political party for the establishment for a decade. You know, they were pushing and pushing and pushing, and now suddenly they are anti-national, they're treasonous, they all have to be locked up, they all have to be, jailed. So, which of the two establishments is right? None, of course, because it's a momentary transitional agenda. And same is the case with the other regional movements and actors. I hope I've addressed your question.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Dr. Maniba from Lahore College, Women University. And I just want to club my question at a global perspective with Dr. Shabana's question and extend it. That, as you said, that the situation of Pakistan and US is almost similar when it comes to the usage of media and the framing sort of a thing. We always say that the research is meant either to explore the problem or to find the solution to that problem. And as you said, that if the Elon Musk has got a hegemony on the algorithm science, and he's successful to let us see whatever he wants the world to see, that what would be the part of the research in that context? As I'm taking the advantage of your exposure being at US, what do you foresee that how this consolidating communication research would counter that hegemony of the richest man of the world, who is now wants to capture not only the world, perhaps he has got more ideas to capture the Mars or the whole universe. So how would this research would help us, and how would we think that the situation in Pakistan would be better if the US has surrender in front of him? Thank you.
नहीं, ये बहुत अच्छा आपका सवाल है, क्योंकि देखिए ये भी एक आलमगीरियत का जो है दौरा, उसमें एक बहुत बड़ी डिबेट दुनिया में यही है कि ये जो तहकीक की जाती है, जैसे आपने कहा कि नई रिसर्च हो रही है, उसका क्या फ़ायदा है, वो कौन उसको इम्प्लीमेंट करेगा, कौन उसको पढ़ेगा. जी, तो इन पाकिस्तान या साउथ एशिया में देखिए दो बातें हैं. एक तो ये है कि डिस्कनेक्ट तो है पॉलिसी मेकर्स और रिसर्चर्स के दरमियान, और पाकिस्तान में तो वैसे भी अभी कुछ सूरत हाल बदली है, क्योंकि ज़्यादा यूनिवर्सिटीज़ बन गई हैं, स्टेट की पॉलिसी है उस हवाले से, लेकिन उस तरह से एकेडमी को सीरियस नहीं लिया जाता. अनफॉर्चुनेट रियलिटी है. जिस तरीके से आप देखेंगे कि दुनिया में और ममालिक में इसके ऊपर, हत्ता कि हिंदुस्तान में भी किसी हद तक जो है वो सीरियस लिया जाता है. पाकिस्तान में तो आपको पता है कि सब वो थानेदारी के अलावा हर शोबा जो है उसको अच्छा नहीं समझा जाता. वो समझते हैं कि जी ये तो लो जी ऐसे इतना कुछ पढ़ लिख के लेक्चरर लग गए हो, सुना होगा ना आपने इस तरह का फिक्रा. तो और उससे क्या ही अच्छा होता है, SHO लग जाते हैं, SI बन जाते हैं, या कोई सरकारी महकमा नहर में इरिगेशन डिपार्टमेंट में आ जाते. वो एक सोसाइटल एटीट्यूड्स भी हैं. اور اس میں ظاہری بات ہے ونس اگین جو ہم پہلے بات کر رہے تھے کہ اسٹیٹ کا جو ایٹیٹیوڈ ہوتا ہے یا اس کا جو رویہ ہوتا ہے وہ بہت اہم ہوتا ہے. لیکن میرے خیال سے اکیڈمی کا بھی ایک رول ہے. وہ ماحول ایسا ہے ہماری دنیا بھر میں یہی ایک اس وقت ایک یہ چیلنج ہے کہ اکیڈیمیا کس طرح سے جو اپنی تحقیق ہے اس کو آگے پھیلائے. بہت سا اچھا کام ہوتا ہے, اکثر وہ آپس میں اسی طرح کے کمروں کے اندر گفت و شنید میں 15-20 لوگ ایک پیپر کو ریویو کرتے ہیں, 15-20 اس کو پڑھ لیتے ہیں اور اللہ اللہ خیر صلی اللہ پروموشن مل جاتی ہے یا مارکس مل جاتے ہیں. آگے اس کا پبلک امپیکٹ کیا ہوتا ہے؟ تو اس کے لیے میرے خیال سے ایکیڈیمک جو ہے پالیسیز ان کو بھی ری فریم کرنا ہوگا. ابھی آپ نے اگر نوٹ کیا ہو تو امریکہ میں اور یورپ میں اب بہت سارے پروفیسرز اور محققین جو ہیں وہ اخبارات کے لیے لکھتے ہیں اور اس پر زور دیا جاتا ہے کہ آپ اپنے پیپرز تو لکھ رہے ہیں, پبلش کریں اپنے مقالے, مگر آپ اخبارات کے لیے بھی لکھیں تاکہ جس چیز پر آپ کام کر رہے ہیں وہ عوام تک پہنچے, پالیسی میکر تک پہنچے. دیکھیے آپ یہ بھی پالیسی میکرز کے لیے بھی مشکل ہوتا ہے دقیق قسم کے مقالے پڑھنا جس میں کہ بڑی ٹیکنیکل لینگویج ہو, چاہے وہ کمیونیکیشنز کی ہو یا کسی اور شعبے کی ہو, تو آپ کس طرح سے ان کو انفلوئنس کریں. آپ کا ایک ایوریج ایم این اے یا ایک ایوریج بیوروکریٹ اسلام آباد میں یا لاہور سیکریٹریٹ میں, ہم ان سے یہ توقع بھی نہیں کرنی چاہیے کہ وہ واقعی میں ایک 40-50 صفحے کا ایک پیپر پڑھیں گے اور اس کے اوپر غور کریں گے. تو وہ ایک برج کرنے کی ضرورت ہے. امپیکٹ بالکل ہوتا ہے میرے خیال سے, کوئی بھی لکھا ہوا حرف جو ہے یا کوئی بھی تحقیق جو ہے وہ بیکار تو نہیں ہوتی, اس کی اپنی ایک زندگی ہوتی ہے, اس کا ایک اپنا ایک امپیکٹ ہوتا ہے, لیکن اس کو بڑھاوا کیسے دیا جائے یہ سوال ہے. انفارچونیٹلی کوئی سیدھا اس کا جواب نہیں ہے.
السلام علیکم, دس از ڈاکٹر شبانہ فرام لاہور کالج فار ویمن یونیورسٹی. اب میرا جو سوال ہے وہ آپ کے جو موضوع ہے, بنیادی موضوع ہے, اس کے حوالے سے ہے. اب بہت اچھے ایریاز آپ نے ٹرائی کر کے ہمیں دیے, اور بینگ دا اسٹوڈنٹ آف کمیونیکیشن ہم ہمیشہ اینڈ ایز ریسرچرز ہمیشہ اس تلاش میں رہتے ہیں کہ لیٹسٹ جو ہے کے حوالے سے ہمیں موضوعات ملے. ایک بنیادی مقصد اس طرح کی ایکٹیویٹیز میں آنے کا بھی یہی ہوتا ہے. لیکن اصل سوال یہ ہے کہ وہ ساری ریسرچز جو اب سے پہلے تک ہو چکی ہیں, یا وہ ساری ریسرچز جو اب ہم کریں گے, ایک دیر از اے ہیوج گیپ بٹوین دا اکیڈیمک ریسرچ اینڈ دا پالیسی میکنگ اینڈ دا امپلیمنٹیشن آف دیٹ ریسرچ. سو وہ ساری ایفرٹ جو ہم کرتے ہیں یا جو ہم کریں گے, اس کا یوزیج کیا ہے, اس کا فائدہ کیا ہوگا؟
No, thank you. I mean, I think it's a very important question, and obviously, research is primarily to interrogate and investigate the kind of world that we live in and make sense of it. I think some of the tools that we use often in communications research have also changed. Increasingly, to understand how algorithms work, we need to have more of expertise on data sciences, right? So it's that kind of, so the traditional communication scholarship is important and relevant, but it needs to be then clubbed with a more technology-based expertise.
We need to have certain arrangements for the media information and
Exactly.
for the common man.
Exactly. So first of all, as I said, we still don't know how algorithms work in Pakistan. I mean, we have a broad idea, but we don't exactly know who actually shapes that algorithm. Obviously, they are done through automatic bots and artificial intelligence now, but we have limited knowledge of that. Until we don't get that kind of knowledge as to how Meta, X, and others work, we're not able to understand that. So that's one part. The other part is that then we have examples, not a very healthy one, from China, where X does not exist. Okay? They have their own bubble. So whether that is a good model or not is again a debate. Is a research question. Okay, it's a research question. I'm not going to say that we should follow that or not follow that, but we need to investigate what impact does it have. Should we be subjected to Western capitalism's idea of a news consumer as an object of marketing? Google, for example, is regularly fined in Europe. Pakistan mein nahi hota. When you go to a website, you don't get that notification کہ cookies جو ہے وہ آپ کو ٹریک کر رہی ہیں. آپ یورپ میں جائیں تو وہ آپ کو کہتے ہیں, آپ گوگل کے لیے سرچ کرتے ہیں تو وہ کہتے ہیں کہ آپ کوکیز ایکسیپٹ کریں یا ریجیکٹ کریں. یہ یورپین کورٹ نے ایک مقدمے کے بعد گوگل کو کہا کہ آپ یہ کنزیومر کو بتائیں گے. امریکہ اور پاکستان میں ایسا نہیں ہوتا. یہاں پہ آپ کہیں بھی آن لائن چلے جائیں, آپ کا ڈیٹا سٹور ہو رہا ہے, کرالر کیچ کر رہا ہے آپ کی لوکیشن کیا ہے, آپ نے کس چیز کو سرچ کیا ہے, آپ نے کون سی ساڑی خریدی ہے کل, اچھا, یا آپ کو کون سا فلم پسند ہے, آپ کو کون سا کھانا پسند ہے, آپ نے کہاں پہ, وہ ساری انفارمیشن کمپنیز کو دی جاتی ہے, اور وہ کمپنیز آگے سے آپ کو اپنی پروڈکٹس بھیجتی ہیں, اور آپ کو ایک ٹارگٹ کر کے جو ہے وہ کرے. تو یہ اس پہ بحث ہونی چاہیے, اور پاکستان میں یہ اشد ضروری ہے, اور اس میں اسی وجہ سے اکیڈیمیا کا بہت امپورٹنٹ رول ہے میڈم, کیونکہ یہ کام اسکالرس کو ہی کرنا ہے نا. تو مطلب ہم ان سے, ہاں وہی ایگزیکٹلی, جی کوشش تو وہی, تو وہ مطلب یہ دیز آر دا کوسچنز ٹو بی انٹروگیٹڈ. Thank you.